Hey guys, and welcome to another Q&A Monday video. In this video I try to answer as many of your questions as I can in as much detail as possible, but I get so many questions every single day that I just can't answer them all. So if I don't get to your question in this video, don't worry, I might get to it in the next one. If not, just drop it down in the comments and I'll answer it as soon as I can. So without further ado, let's jump into the first question. Barbara Stone asks, have you ever asked Daniel or Anna about the afterlife? Yes, I've asked that question quite a lot actually, and the problem with it is the reason you don't really see it in my communication videos is because I don't get responses to it. Like, it's very rare that I get any kind of communication back from that question, whether it's EVP, spirit box or whatever. It just tends to go quiet during that question. The only time that I can think of really where I've had an actual solid reply from it was in a PSB7 spirit box session where Daniel said faith.
Something after this, is there like a heaven or an afterlife or something like that? Can you tell me that?
Faith.
You said faith. You want me to have faith?
Now, as far as I can tell, I mean, I will keep asking the question. I mean, I'm as curious as you guys are, but I don't expect to really ever get that answer. And I don't know if it's some kind of divine law that they're not allowed to tell us. I mean, you know me, I'm not particularly religious, but it could be that. It could be that they themselves just don't know. But so far, no responses, but I'll keep trying. Mark Anderson asks, hi Michael, what do you think reality really is? Do we exist on one plane / dimension, and when we die we move to another or something else? Now, I've shared my beliefs on the afterlife with you guys before, and I'm very much of the opinion that what you see is what you get. Now, that's not to say that when you die that's it. I obviously think that when we die, our energy, what makes up our personalities, our spiritual selves, transfers into another form of energy, but it doesn't go to another dimension, another plane of existence. It's within our reality, within what we know. The only problem is we don't yet understand it, so it's not something we can just tap into and explain away and just, you know what I mean, talk to whenever we want. It is within our reality, but just beyond our understanding, as it were. And so that's not to say I don't necessarily believe in other dimensions. I believe the idea that our futures aren't written. I think life would be pointless if it was. I like the idea that if you come to a fork in the road and you go left, one thing will happen, you go right, something else will happen. You go forward, something completely different will happen. I don't think you're necessarily destined to go right. I don't think that is written. I think you could go right if you want, you could go left if you want, and in whichever way you choose, you have essentially split that timeline. You have created an alternate reality, but I don't think you can access the other realities, if you know what I mean. I think once you have written a path, that's your path written. Like, it's not pre-written, but it's final, if you know what I mean. So yes, I believe in other dimensions, but no, I don't think that's necessarily where the spirits are coming from. I think what you see is what you get. Crystal Ann asks, does it ever happen that you're entertaining at your house and spiritual activity starts to occur? If so, what do your guests say or do? Now, as I said before, I mean, the house really isn't as active as it looks. I think the videos give a false sense of frequency on the paranormal activity. I mean, if left to their own devices, I mean, I'm going out of my way to try and capture this stuff a lot of the time. I'm experimenting, I'm asking them to interact. That's why I capture so much. If just left to their own devices, I genuinely think it'd be days, even weeks apart between unusual events happening. So when I bring around somebody to entertain, you know, to have a catch up, whatever, they're around for maybe 2 or 3 hours. It's a very small segment of time in which something could happen. I mean, the chances are pretty slim. Usually when I bring someone around, it's somebody that already knows me. They know what I've been through. They know my history. They know what I do, like with my YouTube videos and stuff like that. So when things have happened, like we've heard footsteps upstairs, something fall off the mantelpiece, they've just kind of made light of the situation, like, ghosts again, you know, like, just brush it off, like, make light of it, because it's easier than just getting scared about it. What worries me, and I've been quite fortunate this hasn't happened yet, is bringing someone around that doesn't know me, that doesn't know that I have this haunting situation and paranormal activity. Because if something were to happen around them, you've got to have that awkward conversation, and that is a horrible conversation to have because you never really know how they're going to react when you say they go, oh, spirits, you know what I mean? You can't make light of it. You have to explain it in a kind of serious way that doesn't sound like you're just taking the piss or like trying to trick them or something like that. So, I mean, I've been fortunate that it hasn't happened to somebody that doesn't already know about it, but it does happen. It's just few and far between. Michael John Thompson asks, when you first started investigating and uploading to YouTube, did you ever think you would get this big and have a massive fan base? Not at all, no. I mean, when this all started, the idea was I was originally going to do a one-off documentary about some freaky stuff that was happening in the house. Robert said it was haunted, and I kind of wanted to go out my way to try and debunk what he was saying, like just to prove it wrong so that it put rumours to rest kind of thing. I had no idea then that 6 years later I'd be uploading a video a week to an audience of 81,000 people that have subscribed. I mean, 81,000 is an unreal number. I would have never imagined having that many. I remember getting 100 and being so excited that many people gave a shit enough to click the subscribe button. 81,000 like is beyond anything I could have imagined. So thank you all so much for subscribing. I really do appreciate it. And a follow-up question. Have you been recognised on the street yet by a stranger? Now, I've only ever actually been recognised the one time, and to be honest, I didn't really deal with it as well as I could have done. I mean, I don't think I was rude about it or anything. Basically, I'd met some friends and we were in a pub and they kind of totted off ahead of me. I was following them and I felt a tap on my arm and I turned and there was this lass and she was all like, do you have a YouTube channel? I was like, yeah. It's like, oh, I watch your videos, you know what I mean? They're really good. And I didn't really know what to say, so I just kind of, thanks, and then just slinked away into the crowd. Like, it's probably the worst fan experience they could have had. And I have talked to her since on Facebook, and I apologise for my really terrible social skills. But as I say, I was just completely caught off guard. Like, I'd never been recognised before. Like, no one's ever gone, you're that guy, or anything like that. It was just like, I didn't know what to do. Obviously, thinking back, if I met somebody now, I'd be a little bit more prepared for it. But because it caught me off guard, I was with some friends and they'd totted off. I didn't want to lose them either, and so it was a little bit awkward. But yeah, and not actually met anybody since. But if I do, I promise I'll be better. Candice asks, is there a way to tell if a spirit is messing with you or doesn't have good intentions? I mean, there's no like written rules and like you can tell by these particular points. I think it's very much to do with the feel of the situation. I mean, if you're talking to a spirit and the air suddenly changes, like it just feels different and it's really hard to explain. I mean, the best I can think of, and I think I've explained it like this before, is if you're in a room and someone comes in and they're in a good mood, you can kind of tell that person's in a good mood. And the same thing if someone comes in and they're royally pissed off, you can tell. I mean, it's not all looking at them, obviously, if they're coming with like angry faces and whatnot, you can tell by looking at them. But there is a sense in the air that you could feel the bad vibes just oozing from them, and you're just like, I'm not feeling right about that. Maybe it's an empathy thing, but I tend to find like I've had situations with meditation experiment where I've been communicating and it just switches, and I don't know if it's necessarily a temperature change, like the vibrations in the air, or what it is, but it's hard to put your finger on it. You will feel the difference. But all I'll say is like, don't confuse just being scared of a situation with that oppressive feeling, because it's easy if you're not experienced much with spirits, that when a spirit is present, that is scary, but that doesn't necessarily mean that spirit is meaning you any harm. It's just that's an internal thing. Like you just happen to be scared of that situation. If a spirit is oppressing you, you should be able to tell the difference, and I guess that will come with experience. And I know this answer didn't really help, but hopefully it gave you some insight into how I tell the difference. Joshua asks, have you ever heard spirits speak clearly to you? Not EVP or whatever, whispers in the ear. Not clearly. I have heard disembodied voices in the past. Now, spirit boxes and EVP sessions aside, whenever I've heard them, it's always been at a point where I'm not expecting it. So like my mind is just unfocused on anything in particular. So like when I'm asleep or if I'm doing some kind of mundane task and my mind's just kind of wandered off. I think it's very significant though. I think it's like a double-edged sword. I think you've got the fact that because your mind's unfocused, you are able to essentially tap into the spirit realm. You're more open to it, you're more aware of it, and so you can hear things. But because you're not focused on it, you don't necessarily hear exactly what was said. It's the same as if you're in a house and somebody bursts through the door and just shouts a sentence at you. You don't register all of it. If it went on long enough, you'd obviously start to pick it up as you went along, but you don't really register what's said. You register that somebody's talked to you, and you'll probably go, say that again, but you've not quite heard it specifically. And I think it's the same kind of thing. Whenever I've heard it, it's always been like distance, like somebody shouting for me from the other side of the house, kind of like muffled and off in the distance, and kind of, kind of quiet, really. I mean, that's the only way I can explain it, is it catches me off guard. So I've heard it a couple of times, but never really heard it clearly. Christy asks, is anyone in your family sensitive to spirit activity? For example, your parents, grandparents, etc. Now, my family is kind of split down the middle, really. I mean, my dad's side are a little bit more religious, so like spirits and, paranormal activity never really factors in for them. And, that's their belief, that's fine. I mean, my dad wasn't the same, really. He believed in spirits, but the rest of the family, not so much. My mum's side, on the other hand, they're a little bit more spiritual. They're the kind of people that will go see mediums and, believe in haunted houses, that sort of stuff. As far as people being sensitive, though, and being in any way mediumistic themselves or psychic in any way, I don't think so. At least not that I've ever been told, and I have asked. Not a particular sensitive person, but like I say, they're a little bit more spiritual on my mum's side. So if there was one, I reckon it'd have been somewhere down that line. Mary asks, have you ever been contacted by an evil spirit or demon? How did you get rid of them, if you have? If you go back and you actually watch the videos through from the beginning, I mean, to start with, it was a particularly negative entity that was following me and that had grown attached to me. And it was what you'd consider demonic, if you believe in that sort of thing. I mean, I kind of jumped from one side to the other. At one point, I'm like, this is definitely demonic, this is a demon. But then I don't hold any particular religious belief, so in that way, it's a contradiction. And I'm like, is it just a particularly negative type of entity? And so, I mean, if you believe in that kind of thing, then that is probably as close to demonic presence as it can get. And this thing would follow me around. And the way I've kind of narrowed it down is, I was going through a particularly negative patch in my life before this all started, and I never really put two and two together, but I think that was partially to do with why it attached itself to me. Maybe it saw me as an easy target. Like, maybe it was in the house to start with, but then through my own negativity, it's latched on. And I think the way I ended up getting rid of it was through a general all-round spiritual change, I guess. I mean, I became more positive, and I obviously got over my own depression. I started smudging on a regular basis, which smudging is like Native American ritual. You burn sage and do a little prayer, and it cleanses the house of negativity. I mean, and I think all this combined with the fact that I had Daniel there as well, which is like my spirit guide, like my protecting spirit. He was there helping me on a spiritual level, and so I think the culmination of these things just really helped to push this negative entity out. And I've not, as of yet, and I mean, touch wood, like, experienced anything quite that bad since. I've felt negative presences during like sessions, like where something's coming in and it just doesn't quite feel right, and then I call it quits, smudge the house, cleanse things up, get my positive vibe on, and then that's been the end of it. So it's not been quite the same since, but that's personally how I went about dealing with that situation. Demi asks, Michael, do you think everyone has a spirit that protects, follows, and helps them? Now, obviously, there's no way for me to verify this. This is just my opinion and my own beliefs, but I think that everyone has a spirit or two that is protecting them. I do. I think that everybody has a guide of some kind, and how that works, I don't know. Who appoints them, I really have no idea. But I do think everybody has a spirit guide of some kind, but I think it depends on each individual person as to how active a role that spirit plays. So in cases like myself, where I was in a very negative place, like emotionally and obviously spiritually, I had the whole negative entity thing going on. It was then almost vital for my protecting spirit, my guardian angel, or whatever you want to call it, to come forward and play an active role and to help me get out of that slump. Whereas if somebody was perfectly fine, you know what I mean, happy every single day, had absolutely no problems, no spiritual activity whatsoever, then they have no reason to interfere. They take a back seat and just let their lives unfold. So I do think that everybody has one, but like I say, I think it depends on the person as to how active a role they play. Christine asks, when a building that is haunted and has old parts of the house and newer additions, are the ghosts limited to the older parts of the house? I think it depends on the type of spirit. Now, there are free roaming spirits, as far as I understand, that they can pretty much go wherever they want. So if this house was haunted by a free roaming spirit, then they could pretty much go in and out of the house. They could go to the old, to the new. Maybe they're attached to an object and they can roam around, whatever. But then you have residual hauntings, which aren't necessarily like ghosts, like as I've experienced them, where they can come in and they can interact and stuff. It is like an imprint of energy over time that has sort of seeped into the foundations of most likely the older part of the house, because it's been there longer. It's absorbed more energy, and so you kind of get echoes from a life that's ended. And so this is sort of doomed to repeat the same patterns because it is just an imprint. There is no intelligence there. And so you will find that in that kind of situation, in a residual haunting, they are glued to the old side of the house. You won't hear anything in the new side. Obviously, it might echo across, maybe, but generally speaking, they are stuck to the old side of the house. So, yeah, I do think it depends on the type of haunting that you're dealing with. Anna asks, what do you think about TV shows like Paranormal Lockdown or Ghost Hunters, etc.? Do you think they're fake for TV or real? Now, obviously, I can't say for sure. I mean, I have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. All I know is from my own studies of TV and film. I think these investigators get into shows like that because they want to do it. They want to research the paranormal for a living, and this is an outlet to do that. They've got all this extra funding. You know what I mean? They can funnel that into their investigations. Really go out and find some amazing stuff. But it's kind of a double-edged sword. You've got all this funding, which is great, but then that funding has come from somewhere, and so you've got a lot of pressure from above to deliver on your show. It's not something like on YouTube where you can go out and you can do it. And if you don't capture anything, you can just come on and say, look, didn't capture anything, end of story. It's on your own back. Nobody's paid you to make sure you capture something. But when you've funneled thousands and thousands of pounds into a location to go and investigate, and then you come out, you can't go out and tell your producer, yeah, we didn't capture anything. Like, that was a complete waste of money, because that they've got to explain that. So you kind of end up with a kind of awkward situation there. It's like, do you overact a little bit to a smaller bit of evidence and make out like it's really big, like make a big deal out of like an orb or something like that? Or do you go down the route, and this is worst case scenario, and I'm not accusing anybody of doing it, do you falsify evidence and make sure that you come away with something amazing? And I think this is just unfortunately, it's the pressure of TV. I think this is just how it works. And on the other hand, even beyond falsifying evidence, all that, you've gone to an investigation and you shot a load of stuff and you've caught loads of interesting things. You've got to then piece together a story. Like, when the editor gets hold of this and they put it together, it's got to flow from A to B. And sometimes you find chunks where you're like, we didn't explain that properly. And I think these investigators, these filmmakers are thinking about this while they're on location. And so you get to a point where you've caught a really good bit of activity and this is legit, you've just caught an apparition, whatever. And then you look back over the footage and you're like, but we didn't explain what was happening. We didn't explain why we were doing this, why we set this up. And so you'll go back and you'll shoot the beginning bit after the fact. And sometimes it just looks a bit scripted, because these are investigators, they're not actors. You know what I mean? But they've got to go back and kind of lead that story in. And it's not because they faked it. It's because they need to make sure the story flows, because it's got to be put on TV. And so I think sometimes that can happen as well. And there have been cases where people have bashed a TV show to high heaven. And I've looked at it and gone, well, the evidence itself looks fine. It's just their acting. It just doesn't look great. And so it kind of puts a dampener on the whole episode. But I don't think that's the case. I think that's just making sure you've got a story to tell. And sometimes it's unfortunate, really, that sometimes it affects their credibility. I don't think it should. I think you should just take TV for what it is and judge the person as an individual, what they've done for the community in general, and that's where the credibility should come from. Jeanette asks, do spirits mind if they're cremated rather than being buried? I don't think you can really generalise and say spirits would really dislike to be cremated unless it was against their religion or something like that in life. I think that's exactly what it boils down to. It depends on what the person wanted in life. If a person wanted to be buried and then was cremated, maybe it was cheaper or whatever, then they're probably not going to be happy about that because that's not their dying wish. That's not what they wanted. But you can't really say that all spirits are the same. Like, it just depends on the individual person. And so that's it for this week's Q&A Monday video, guys. I hope I answered your question sufficiently and in enough detail. And like I said before, if I didn't get to your question in this video, don't worry, just drop it down in the comments and I'll get to it as soon as I can. So thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I'll post any and all activity as and when I get it.